"Open it," the man said, and he said it the way a man says a thing he has never once had refused. "Open that door." I did not move. I stood where I had stood for 3 hours, at the head of the gallery the staff call the quiet wing, a lamp burning low behind me, and the sealed oak of the founder's room 2 strides to my left. Behind that unmoving face of mine, I will tell you plainly, because no one ever asks the man inside the bearskin what he is thinking, I was already counting. Counting the seconds it would take him to understand that the answer he had been given by my eyes was the only answer he would get from my mouth. He had come in soft shoes and a coat that cost more than my year, and he had come after hours, when the public was gone and the corridors were dark, and a man who is used to getting his way assumes the rules have gone dark with the lights. His name does not matter. What mattered was the way the understeward trailed 3 paces behind him, pale and wringing a cloth in both hands, and the way the great man did not once look back at her. "You heard me," he said. He had a low, pleasant voice, the kind that has talked rooms full of frightened people into agreeing with him. "I haven't got all night. The door. I will tell you what was behind that door because it is the whole heart of this, and you should know it the way I knew it. The founder's room is not a treasury. There is no gold in it. It is a small, plain chamber that the first sovereign of our house kept as a study, and it has been sealed, opened only by the keeper of the house on 3 fixed days a year before witnesses for longer than any living man. There is a chair in their worn pail where a hand rested. There is a window that looks at nothing now but a wall. There is a book on a stand, open to the page it was open to the morning the founder died, and no one turns that page. That is all. That is everything. People have offered fortunes to stand in that room alone for an hour. The answer has been the same for 2 centuries, and the answer is no. The great man did not know any of that, and would not have cared. He knew only that there was a door, and that he had been told he could not go through it, and that no one tells him that. "I don't think you understand who I am," he said. "I understand the room is sealed, sir," I said. 2 strides to my left, the oak held its silence better than I held mine. "It does not open at night. It does not open for a visit. The keeper opens it 3 days a year before witnesses. Tonight is not one of them." For a moment he simply looked at me, and I watched the pleasant voice drain out of his face and something older take its place. The plain, flat astonishment of a man discovering that a rule he assumed was for other people has reached out and touched him. It is a particular look. I have seen it before. It never lasts. "I'll have your name," he said. "You may have it, sir." "I'll have your post." "That is not yours to take," I said, "but you may try." The understeward made a small sound behind him, half a word swallowed. He turned on her then, finally, and I saw her flinch before he had said anything at all, and that told me more about how this had started than anything he had said to me. He had not wandered up here. She had been bringing him somewhere, the long gallery of portraits, perhaps, which we do show by private appointment. And somewhere in the dark, he had seen the sealed door, and decided that the appointment he had been granted was not enough, that there was a better one to be had if he simply demanded it, and the poor woman had not known how to say the word that I am paid to say. "It's all right," I told her without looking away from him. "You did nothing wrong. The door is mine, not yours." "You're a doorman," the great man said, and he smiled when he said it, pleased to have found the word. "A doorman in a costume. Do you know how much I have given to this house? Do you know whose hand I shook this evening? I will be in that room in 5 minutes with you or without you, and you will spend the rest of your small life regretting that you made it the hard way. Here is the thing the costume hides, and the thing I want you to hold on to through all of what follows. I was not angry. Anger is a luxury for men who are allowed to move. I had set anger down years ago, on a parade square, under a sergeant who taught me that the still man wins, and the loud man tires himself out. So I was not angry. I was, if anything, a little tired, because I had met this man 100 times in 100 coats, and I knew already how the night would end, and I knew he did not. There is a loneliness in knowing the end of a thing while the other man is still sure he is at the beginning. "The room does not open tonight, sir," I said again. The same words. I have learned that you do not give a man like this new words to argue with. You give him the same wall again and again until he understands it is a wall. He stepped closer. The lamp threw his shadow long across the oak. He was a big man and he used it, leaning in until I could smell the wine of the dinner he had come from, and his voice dropped to the soft register again, the one that had talked all those frightened rooms into yes. "Last chance," he murmured. "Open the door or I make one call one and by morning you are nothing. I know the people who own this place. Do you understand me? I know them by their first names." "I understand you believe that," I said. And I did understand it. That was the trap he could not see. He had spent his life among people who could be moved by a call because they wanted things he could grant or take away, money, position, the warmth of his approval. He had never in his life stood in front of a man who wanted nothing from him. I did not want his money. I did not want his approval. I did not even want him to stop talking, particularly. I had stood 8-hour vigils in sleet and I could stand here listening to him until the sun came up. He had nothing I needed, and so he had no lever, and a man with no lever against you is not powerful at all. He is only loud. But he did not know that yet. He reached past me, not to push me, not yet, but to put his hand flat on the sealed oak itself, the way a man touches a thing to prove he owns it. His palm against the door, his ring clicking once on the wood. "See," he said softly, "nothing happened, the sky didn't fall, it's just a door." "Take your hand off it, sir," I said. And for the first time all night, something in my voice made him pause. Not fear, I had not threatened him and would not. It was that the level of it had not changed. He had raised his temperature, his volume, his contempt, 3 times now, and each time the man in front of him had answered in exactly the same register, and somewhere underneath his certainty, a small cold thought had begun to stir, that he might have walked into the one corridor in this whole vast house where the things he carried did not spend. He took his hand off the door, slowly to make it his own idea and not mine, but he took it off. I want to be honest about what I did next, because people imagine a guard is a statue with a stick, and that is not the work. The work is mostly judgment and the rest is patience. While he had been talking, I had already done the only thing that mattered, and I had done it without him seeing. Set into the frame of the alcove by my right shoulder where the paneling meets the cornice, there is a small brass plate the visitors take for an old gas fitting. It is a call point. The first time he raised his voice, when the door became your post, I had pressed it once with the heel of my hand as I shifted my weight, the way I had been trained to shift it so that the movement was nothing and the signal was everything. 1 press is a query, a man at his post, asking quietly for eyes. 2 is trouble. 3 brings them at a run. I had pressed it once. Then I had given him every chance in the world to take his anger somewhere it could be spent, and he had not, and so a minute later, while his palm was still warm on the oak, I had pressed it again. So when I told him to take his hand off the door, I already knew, though he did not, that somewhere below us, in the paneled room where the duty register lives and a man sits all night with a board of little lights, a second light had come up beside my name, and a sergeant I would trust with my life was already on his feet. "You think this is loyalty," the great man said. He had stepped back half a pace and recovered his smile, and he spread his hands as if explaining something to a slow child. "I admire it truly, but you're loyal to a payslip, my friend, and I'm about to make that payslip vanish. So let me make it simple. Open the door and I forget your insolence and you keep your job. Keep it shut and I ruin you, not the house, your name specifically, tonight." "Which is it?" "The room does not open tonight, sir." He laughed, but it was thinner now. "Are you a recording?" "No, sir, I am a sentry. The recording would have opened the door." I should not have said it. It was one stroke too clever, and a still man does not score points. Scoring points is a thing the loud man does. But I was tired, and it was true, and it landed somewhere it hurt because his face shut like a fist. He looked in that instant like a man deciding whether to do a thing he could not take back. I have seen that look too. It is the most important look to read correctly in this whole trade, because it is the half-second before a man's hands stop obeying his sense, and everything I am trained to do lives in that half-second. I did not raise my voice. I did not reach for him. I set my feet, a small thing, an inch, the weight coming down through the heels, and I let my stillness become the kind of stillness that is not waiting but ready. And I think some animal part of him felt the difference, the way you feel a dog go quiet in a different way, and his hand stayed at his sides. Footsteps then, in the dark behind him. Unhurried, even 2 sets. The particular footsteps of men who have been told there may be trouble, and have decided not to give the trouble the satisfaction of seeing them hurry. The great man turned toward them with relief naked on his face, certain that the cavalry had come for him, that here at last were people who would know his name, and put this insolent doorman in his place. The first to step into the lamplight was my sergeant, the duty sergeant of the quiet wing, a square, gray man named Harrow whom I had served under for 9 years and never once heard raise his voice, because he had never once needed to. Behind him came the steward of the evening, in the dark coat of his office, the man who answers for everything that happens in this house after the doors close. The under-steward, seeing them, let out a breath she seemed to have been holding since the corridor. "Gentlemen," the great man said warmly, turning the full force of the pleasant voice on them. "Thank heaven, there's been a misunderstanding. This man, a flick of the hand at me, not a look, has decided to make my evening difficult. I've been a guest of this house, a generous one, and all I've asked is a few minutes in that room. A private look. Surely that's within someone's gift here. Surely a man of sense, to the steward now, can see his way to a small courtesy." The steward of the evening looked at the sealed door. He looked at me, and I gave him the smallest motion of my chin toward the oak, untouched, the seal intact. Then he looked at the great man for a long, level moment, and when he spoke his voice was as quiet and as flat as my own had been, and I understood that the man had walked, without knowing it, into a whole household built out of the same stillness I was made of. "Sir," the steward said, "the sentry has told you the truth. That room does not open tonight. It does not open at night at all. It opens 3 times a year, by the hand of the keeper of the house, before witnesses, and there is no gift in this building, not mine, not the Lord Chamberlain's, not anyone's below the keeper himself, that can change it for one guest on one evening. I'm sorry your appointment did not include it. It was never going to." The great man's smile held, but it had begun to cost him something to hold it. "Then wake the keeper," he said. "I'll wait." "The keeper does not open the room on demand," the steward said. "He opens it by the calendar. That is the entire point of the room." "I don't think you understand the scale of what I've given." "I understand it precisely, sir," the steward said. "It is recorded to the penny in the ledger of the house, and we are grateful for it. And it buys exactly what it bought every other patron of this house for 200 years, which is our thanks and a fine dinner and the gallery by appointment. It does not buy that door. Nothing buys that door. If it could be bought, sir, it would not be worth standing in front of." And there it was, the sentence I have carried with me ever since, said not by me, the man with the rifle, but by a tired official in a dark coat at the end of a long night. If the door could be bought, it would not be worth standing in front of. The great man heard it, and I watched it fail to go in, because men like him have spent a lifetime proving the opposite, and a single sentence in a dark corridor was not going to undo a life. He needed the lesson larger than a sentence. He was about to ask for it to be made larger, and the house, I knew, was about to oblige. He took out his phone. He held it up so we could all watch him do it, the way a man cocks a pistol to make a point before he has decided whether to fire. "You'll forgive me," he said, with the silk back in his voice, "if I go a little over your heads. No offense intended." It's just that I've found in life that the man at the top is so much easier to deal with than the men in the corridor. He thumbed through his contacts with a small, performing slowness, found a name, and turned the screen toward the steward so he could see it. I could not read it from where I stood. The steward did not lean to look. "That," the great man said, "is a private number. Do you know whose?" "Of course you don't. But you'll know the name when I say it, and so will the men who pay you, and when I tell that man that one of his doormen humiliated me tonight, this becomes a very different conversation. So, one more time, the door, or the call." "Make the call, sir," the steward said. It was not what the man expected. He had wanted a flinch. He pressed the name and put the phone to his ear, and stood there in the lamplight with his chin up, listening to it ring, certain that on the third or fourth ring a voice he owned would answer, and the whole stubborn corridor would dissolve. While it rang he tried, one last time, the only tactic he had left that he had not yet spent. He turned to the understeward, the weakest figure in the corridor, to his eye, the one who had brought him this far and might be frightened into bringing him the rest of the way. "You," he said, gentling his voice the way a man gentles his voice at the very last, when gentleness is all he has. "You let me up here. You know this is unreasonable. One word from you that I'm a guest in good standing, and we put this whole ugly business behind us. I'll see you well looked after. You have my word." He let that hang, the offer and the threat folded into the one sentence the way men like him learn to fold them, so that a person can never quite say which they were hearing. She looked at him. She was a small woman with tired eyes and a cloth twisted to a rope between her hands, and I had thought, an hour before, that she had been brought to the edge of crying by him. I had read that wrong. She was not near to crying. She was only deciding how to say a thing, and when she said it her voice did not shake at all. "I brought you to the portrait gallery, sir," she said, "which is what your card allowed. I did not bring you here, you walked here. And there is nothing I could say that would open that door, because I have no more power over it than you do." She drew a breath. "Less, perhaps. I have to stand near it every day and not open it. You only had to try once." I confess I have remembered that line of hers longer than any of the Lord's. The great man had no answer for it, because there is no answer for the truth said plainly by a tired person who is not afraid of you. He turned away from her as though she had ceased to exist, and put the phone back hard against his ear, and waited for the voice that was not going to come. I will tell you what I learned later, because at the time I only saw the half of it that happened in front of me, and the other half was happening below, in rooms I never entered. While the great man had been talking, the steward of the evening had done his own quiet pressing of his own quiet buttons. A household this old does not survive 2 centuries by being slow. The moment my second signal reached the duty board, a protocol older than any of us had begun to turn, the way a great ship turns, not fast, but with everything moving together. The duty sergeant had come up to me. The steward had come up behind him. And below, the night log had been opened to the page that lives ready for exactly this. The page headed demands upon a sealed apartment, and a name had been entered, and a single line dialed, not to a private number, not to a man who could be charmed, but up the chain, to the office that exists precisely, so that no one charming ever has to be charmed. So the great man's call rang, and went unanswered, because the man whose private number it was had, as it happens, been at the same dinner, and had already that evening had a quiet word in his ear from the Lord Chamberlain's office to the effect that a guest had been making inquiries about the founder's room, and that if a call should come, it would be best for everyone to let it ring. That is the part people never believe. They imagine the powerful all stand together, a single wall of money and names, and that a man like our visitor can always find the one hand that will reach down and lift him over the rules. But the house is older than any of their fortunes, and the house had decided, 200 years before this man was born, that the door was not for sale, and a household that has held a thing for 2 centuries does not let one loud evening pry it loose. The wall the great man imagined, the wall of the powerful, closing around him, did exist. It had simply closed the other way. It had closed around the door. He took the phone from his ear. He looked at it. He pressed the name again. "He's not answering," he said, half to himself. And I heard the first true crack in him, not anger, not yet, but the specific small vertigo of a man whose lever has come away in his hand. "He's not going to, sir," said a new voice from the dark. I knew the voice before I saw the man, and so did the steward, who turned at once and inclined his head. Down the gallery, unhurried as the rest of them, came a tall old gentleman in evening dress with a thin chain of office at his collar, and two men of my own corps a respectful pace behind him, in the plain dark of the night detail. The Lord Chamberlain of the house. The man who, after the sovereign and the keeper, answers for the whole of it. He did not look like a man who had been roused. He looked like a man who had expected, all evening, to take this particular walk, and had merely been waiting to learn at which door he would take it. He stopped a courteous distance from the great man, close enough for civility, far enough to make plain that he had not come to be leaned on, and he looked, first, not at the visitor but at me. "Sentry," he said, "report." "My lord," I said, "a guest of the house asked that the founder's room be opened for a private view after hours. I declined. He asked again with threats to my post and my name. I declined. He placed a hand upon the door. I instructed him to remove it. He did. The seal is intact. The room has not been entered. I signaled the post once for eyes and once for trouble. That is the whole of it, my lord." "Did he strike you?" "No, my lord." "Did you lay a hand on him?" "No, my lord." The Lord Chamberlain nodded once slowly, and I understood that the report I had just given, flat, complete, unembellished, my hands never once leaving my sides through the whole of it, was itself the thing that made everything that came next possible. A guard who had shouted, who had shoved, who had given the great man one true grievance to waive, would have handed him the whole night. I had given him nothing. I had given him a wall, and walls do not get sued, do not get filmed losing their temper, do not become the story. The story now would be only what he himself had done. And the man in the chain of office had come up here to make certain of exactly that before he turned, at last, to the guest. "Sir," the Lord Chamberlain said, and his courtesy was a colder thing than any insult, "I am sorry your evening has come to this. I'll tell you plainly how it stands, and then I'll have these gentlemen see you to your car. That room is sealed by the standing order of the house, an order older than the kingdom's present borders. It is opened by the keeper 3 days a year before witnesses, and by no one else on no other day, for no consideration whatever." The sentry was correct in every particular. The steward was correct. "Your inquiries this evening were noted the moment they began, which is why the gentleman you have been calling will not answer, and will, I expect, be grateful in the morning that he did not. There is nothing for you here but the door you came in by. I have stood through artillery of a kind, and through the long, slow pressure of a vigil that does not end, and I will tell you that the hardest thing to watch is a powerful man understanding, in real time, that he is not. It came over him in stages, there in the lamplight, with 5 of us standing quiet around him and the under-steward at the edge with her cloth still twisted in her hands. First the disbelief, the certainty that this was a misunderstanding that one more sentence would clear. Then the search, his eyes going from face to face, hunting for the one that could be reached, the soft official, the ambitious junior, the man who wanted something. He found none. We were all, every one of us, made of the same stillness, and there was no purchase anywhere on the smooth face of it. And then, when the search failed, the thing I had been watching for from the first minute, the rage. "You think this ends here?" His voice came up out of the silk at last, raw and loud, and it cracked on the high notes the way loud voices do. "You think you've won something, standing in your corridor? I will have every name in this room. I will have your charters reviewed. I will make it my business, my personal business, to see this whole rotten arrangement dragged into the daylight, and we'll see how long your precious door stays shut when the people who actually run this country start asking why a public house keeps a room no one's allowed to see. He rounded on me, the original sin, the doorman who had started it all by simply not moving. And you I'll deal with first. He came at the door. Not at me. He was not, in the end, the kind of man who throws a punch, and I had read that in him an hour before. He came at the door, lunging past me with his shoulder down, his hand out for the iron ring of the latch, in the half-mad notion that if he could only get it open, if he could only put his eyes inside that room for 1 second, then he would have won the thing itself, and all the rest would not matter. This is the half-second I told you about, the one everything lives in. I did not strike him. I want that on the record the way it is on the record in the night log, in my own hand, witnessed by 3. I did not strike him. I stepped 1 short step, the weight already down through my heels where I had set it an hour before, and I put myself between the man and the latch, and I brought my forearm up across his chest, not a blow but a beam, the flat hard bar of a man who has been taught exactly how much of himself to spend and not a fraction more. He ran into it the way a boat runs into a piling. The breath went out of him. His reaching hand closed on nothing but the air a foot short of the iron ring. And I held him there, not hurting him, not throwing him, simply not letting him past. For the 2 seconds it took the 2 men of the night detail to close from either side and take an arm each, firmly and without anger, the way you take hold of a man you have no wish to harm but every intention of removing. "That's enough now, sir," one of them said very quietly. It was over that fast. It is always over that fast when it is done right. The whole of it, the lunge, the bar, the hold, the 2 arms taken, could not have lasted 4 seconds, and in 4 seconds the great man went from a tower of threats to a breathless guest being walked, with perfect courtesy and no possibility of argument, back down the gallery the way he had come. But the house was not finished. I had thought in my smaller way that removing the man was the end. It was not even the middle. As the detail walked him out, I heard, somewhere below and behind, the soft definite sound of the quiet wing sealing itself, the great inner doors of the gallery drawing to, the locks of the night turning over in sequence, the wing going from open by appointment to closed and held in the space of a minute, because a demand had been made upon a sealed apartment, and the standing order does not merely refuse the demand, it answers it. By the time the great man reached the head of the stair, there were more of my corps in the corridors than I had seen on any ordinary night, not running, not drawn up for show, simply present. A quiet, unmistakable density of dark uniforms at every turn between him and the open air, so that the walk-out became, without a single hand raised, a thing he could not have deviated from if he had tried. The house had closed around its door like a hand closing around something small and precious, and the man who had come to take it found himself, suddenly, on the outside of that hand, being shown with great politeness to the gate. At the top of the stair he stopped and turned, and looked back down the long lamplit gallery to where I still stood at my post, for I had not moved. I will say that again, because it is the center of the whole thing. I had not moved from the spot I held when he first said open it, and the seal of the founder's room was exactly as unbroken as it had been 200 years before either of us was born. He looked at me down all that length of polished floor, and I could not read his face at that distance, and I did not try. I only stood. The lamp burned low behind me. The oak held its silence. Whatever he was looking for in me, a flicker of triumph, a sag of relief, some human thing he could despise and so feel large again, he did not find it because it was not there. There was only the post, and the man holding it, and the door behind us both that does not open for anyone's whim. Then the detail moved him on, and the dark of the stair took him, and the understeward let out the longest breath I have ever heard a person let out, and somewhere below a clock I had never once heard in 3 years of nights chimed the half-hour into the new and perfect quiet. The Lord Chamberlain came back up the gallery alone. He stood beside me a moment, the two of us facing the sealed oak, and neither of us said anything, which is its own kind of conversation between men of our sort. Then he asked me one question, in the low, even voice he had used the whole evening. "Were you tempted, sentry, at any point, to open it and end the trouble? Be honest with me." "No, my lord," I said, and it was the truth, and I have thought about why ever since. I think it is this. A man like the visitor believes that every door is a transaction, that behind it is a thing, and the only question is the price, and the price is whatever it takes to make the man in the way step aside. He looked at the founder's room and saw a thing he had been refused, and to him, a thing refused is the most desirable thing in the world, because the refusal is the only insult his money has never been able to answer. He could not imagine that the door was not about him at all. He could not imagine that I was not weighing his threats against my payslip, that I was not, somewhere in my stillness, calculating whether to fold. He thought the wall was a negotiation that had simply not yet found its number. But I was not negotiating because there was nothing to negotiate. The door is not mine to open. It is not the steward's nor the Lord Chamberlain's nor, and this is the whole of it, even the keeper's on any but his 3 appointed days. It belongs to no living person at all. It belongs to a man 2 centuries dead, to the page of a book left open and never turned, to a chair worn pale by a hand that is dust. We are not its owners. We are its sentries. And you cannot tempt a sentry with the price of a thing he does not own and never could. That is why a household of quiet men can hold a door against a fortune, because not one of us, from the boy who signals the post to the Lord with the chain at his collar, has the power to sell it, and a thing that no one has the power to sell is the safest thing in the kingdom. The great man kept looking for the one of us who could be bought, and the terrible, beautiful answer was that there wasn't one, not because we are saints, but because the house, long ago, took that power out of all our hands on purpose, so that no loud evening and no soft voice and no private number could ever do what he came to do. If the door could be opened by the right pressure, it would have been opened long ago, by someone richer or more frightening or more charming than he, and there would be nothing behind it now but a tourist's photograph and a velvet rope. It is sealed not to keep us out but to keep it whole, to keep one small plain room in all the world that no power can buy its way into, so that there is at least one place where a hand is still resting on a chair, and a page is still open to the morning it was open to, untouched by every great man who ever decided the rules were for other people. That is what I was standing in front of, not gold, just a thing that no one is allowed to take. I have come to think that is the most valuable thing a house can own. The morning after I wrote my report, as I have written it here, flat, complete, my hands never leaving my sides. The night log was signed by the steward and the Lord Chamberlain and by Sergeant Harrow, and the page-headed demands upon a sealed apartment took its newest line beneath the others, the earlier ones in inks gone brown, some of them naming visitors whose fortunes are long since spent and whose names mean nothing now, every one of them having stood, on some other night across 200 years, exactly where the great man stood, and made the same demand and been told the same word, and gone out the same door. He thought he was the first, he was only the latest, the book of them is nearly full. The visitor did make his calls, in the days after. I heard of it the way the post hears of everything, in low words at the change of the watch. There were letters. There were, I am told, some loud meetings in offices far from any corridor I will ever stand in. And it all came to exactly nothing, because there was nothing in it, no struck guard, no open door, no grievance the daylight could be made to care about, only a record in 3 hands of a man who had demanded what cannot be demanded and been escorted, with perfect courtesy, to his car. The house did not fight him. It simply was older than he was and answered to a thing he could not reach, and outlasted his anger the way it has outlasted every anger before his. Within a fortnight his name had gone quiet, and the door was exactly as it had been, which is to say, shut. I am back at my post tonight as it happens, the same lamp, the same 2 strides of polished floor between me and the oak. In a few weeks it will be one of the 3 days, and the keeper will come with his witnesses, and turn the great key that I will never hold, and the door will open, and the small plain room will be aired and looked upon by the few whose duty it is, and then it will be sealed again for another season, and I will stand in front of it through all the long nights between as men have stood before me and will stand after me, and I will not once be tempted, because there is nothing here to tempt me with. People imagine the hardest part of this work is the cold, or the standing, or the tourists who press their faces close to see if I will blink. It is none of those. The hardest part is that no one ever knows what you held. The great man went out into the night believing he had been thwarted by a stubborn doorman in a costume, and the world will never know any different, and that is exactly as it should be, because the whole point of a sentry is that the thing he guards goes on being guarded long after everyone has forgotten there was ever a night someone tried to take it. The door does not open for anyone's whim. It never did. It never will. And on the nights when my feet ache and the lamp burns low and the corridor is so quiet I can hear the old clock count the hours, I find there is no place in all the world I would rather be standing than in front of the one door that all the money on earth cannot move. Because as long as a man stands here who cannot be bought, neither can it.